Inside each one there lies a force, a creative genius which guides our course. With steady desire and persistent heart, he takes his place and plays a part. Whether high or low, who can know? His place in life he will show. Patient eyes and discerning ears, he sorts out truth, discarding fears. Through miles of travel on different roads, little by little the picture unfolds. The key was hidden within a dream, to learn an ancient language it seems, to shape and mold the waking dream. Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio with the Monkey Crew. We've got Tom, Elifie, and Greg with us today. And we are recording this on May 30th of 2015. And man, I tell you what, guys, I'm excited about this show today. We actually lucked out by having Sarah, I can't pronounce her last name. Sorry, Sarah. Sherglatt, our publicist that sends us wonderful tips on some amazing people that are stepping out on the world stage. And yeah, I'm very grateful for what she gives to us.
Yes.
So Elifie, we got a couple things we want to touch on in the news.
Yeah, I was just looking online this past week, and I do a lot of research into food, and I'm very conscious on what I eat. And I posted a couple things on our Facebook page, and one of them was a picture of human brain, and it talks about what things that we eat that affect us and how they affect us. So I'm just going to go over the list very shortly. And so we have heavy metals that we all ingest through the air and through the foods, heavy and soft metals, but they contribute to everything from Alzheimer's to autism to Parkinson's disease, and the list just goes on. Another thing that we should try to avoid is MSG or monosodium glutamate, because those, they contribute to, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, just a bunch of other things. But also we have artificial sweeteners and fluoride. So I would just recommend that, when we're out at the grocery store, read labels and, use your own discernment to what you actually ingest in your body. I also posted another article on Facebook that's looks like a snack food, but they're raw protein balls, and the recipe is super simple. It only takes a few minutes to make, but I'll just run down the list of the main ingredients. And it's a hemp protein powder, which is high in protein, obviously. Flaxseed, chia seeds, almonds, raw cocoa powder, maple syrup. And according to this article, it only takes between 5 and 10 minutes to mix all this stuff together, and it's like a ball of protein. And myself, I'm a vegetarian, so it is difficult to get protein in the sense of, I just can't go and eat a piece of chicken. So I'm always yeah, peanut butter. that's one of my daughter's nicknames is peanut butter. But yeah, it is hard for us to get, these certain things in our diets when we're just eating fruits and vegetables and grains. So I posted this link on our Facebook page, the 100th Monkey Facebook page, and so you can go through this and you can see, how easy it actually is to get these other sources of protein when you're not eating meat, and this is just one example. And like I said, it's all these, healthy, organic, non-GMO ingredients that give us the protein that we all need. So that's about all I have for the news today. And yeah.
That's good stuff. I know my diet has changed dramatically in the last 5-6 years since, I really started focus. Well, really, actually, when Ramon and I started the radio show, and I started devoting a lot more time to my own awareness, my own consciousness, I kind of organically and naturally, my diet evolved tremendously, and now it's like maybe once a week I'm eating meat, and it's just, that's naturally the way I evolved. So it's been pretty good stuff. One more thing I want to touch on before we head off and bring our guest in here is that we have restructured our whole pricing set up for members on the 100th Monkey Radio for that second hour content. So we've dropped the prices across the board, and if you guys are interested in becoming members, I would definitely urge you to come on over to www.100thmonkeyradio.com and check us out. We've got 5 years worth of shows there, so some good stuff. Okay, so on with the show. We have a guest from us directly from the UK, and her name is Sunita Pattani, and I hope I pronounced all that right. She is a psychotherapist and author based in East London who specializes in exploring the link between mind, body, spirit, and emotional healing. Since childhood, she's been fascinated with science, spirituality, consciousness, and the deeper question of who we really are. She explores this question from a multidisciplinary perspective and implements the findings within her therapy practice. Pattani is a graduate of the University of Birmingham, where she obtained a degree in mathematics, science, and education in 2003, followed by a postgraduate certificate in education in 2004. Pattani taught for 5 years before she returned to college to study an advanced diploma in hypnotherapy and psychotherapeutic counseling. Alongside running her psychotherapy practice, she shares her message through a combination of speaking, running workshops, and writing. A regular blogger for the Huffington Post, Pattani's first book, My Secret Affair with Chocolate Cake, The Emotional Eater's Guide to Breaking Free, was published in 2012. And her second book, The Transcendent Mind, The Missing Piece in Emotional Well-Being, has been published, I believe, just a couple of months ago in March of this year. In her private life, she practices spirituality and personal transformation. She lives in East London, UK, with her husband, Hinal, and a cat, Coco. I love that. Her website is Sunita, I hope I'm pronouncing you right, sunitapattani.com, and all the links are in the info section of wherever you happen to be listening to that. Am I saying that correct, Sunita?
You are indeed. Yes, that's right, Sunita Pattani.
All right. Thank you so much. Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here today.
So, in that bio, we kind of picked up that you've, kind of been on this, had this interest the majority of your life. But I know that most of the people that we've talked to, there's always been some certain event or some pivotal point in their life where they really turned their feet towards really understanding who and what we are. And it's always, obviously goes into the spirituality aspect of life and understanding the deeper meanings. So was there some event or point in your life that actually made you start asking those real deep questions?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think I've had several. The earliest that I can remember was, and this is going to sound really bizarre actually, I think I must have been 6 or 7. And I remember having a really, really frightening thought. And that thought was, what happens if the world blew up? And what happens if there was just like no world and no universe? And that thought, I mean, I was very young at the time, really, really frightened me, because the idea of not knowing what lies beyond and whether there's more to us is quite a daunting thought. It kind of makes you question why we're here in the first place. So I think that was really the earliest thing that I can remember. And then at age 19, I started sort of dabbling around with some of the metaphysical books. An aunt of mine is really into the metaphysical side, and when I had a conversation with her, that's really when I started exploring. But actually, it wasn't until I think it was my mid-20s. And life has this habit of really bringing us down to our knees sometimes. The dark night of the soul, so to speak. And I think that was really mine. We had a major business collapse. I developed a terrible eating disorder, hence the first book. Relationship was on the brink, mountain of debt. And that's really when it was just, a case of, right, I've really got to have a look at what is going on and how can I sort this out. And I think that's really when the intensive journey started, So, yeah.
Yeah. So you're, you've gotten into the hypnotherapy and the psychotherapy. I'm curious how you are integrating the spirituality aspect into the psychotherapy process.
Absolutely. So what I actually discovered was that when I started my psychotherapeutic practice, I found that traditional psychotherapy wasn't actually working very well, for a lot of people. And, I started to actually question why that was the case. And then slowly I started to ask myself, well, how much do I really know about myself? That, okay, I understand the mind and, your traditional psychology, but what about beyond that? Are we a soul? Are we, is there more to us? And at that time, I started to read a book called A Course in Miracles. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So I read that, and in that, I came across a brilliant concept, profound actually, which said that there was one mind or one consciousness, which was actually split up into individualized parts, which would be us. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then I went and read the ancient Hindu scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita. And again, in that as well, it talked about an all-pervading consciousness. And I just thought to myself, being the logical person that I am, that where can I go to actually find validation that this is actually the case? So I started to look into near-death experiences. I'd heard along in life at some point that people had these experiences. And what I didn't realize was actually that near-death experiences were an academic area of study. So as I started to look into them, I was just absolutely, amazed by some of the experiences that people had. And, there were some people that had actually claiming to have actually come, face to face with God, the energy of God, so to speak. And that's really when I started thinking, my goodness, if we are a soul, how do we get into contact with it? And where psychotherapy is, how can we possibly treat a person with just the mind or just the body if there is a whole element to us that we are not even sure whether that exists or not, in the grander scheme of things. So ever so slowly, I started to change my psychotherapy practice, and I started to refer to, let's say, near-death experiences, and I started to question people about their spiritual beliefs, and that's really how I started to bring the transcendent element in, and it worked. So it was good.
So what were you finding out with these people you were questioning that had these near-death experiences, and based upon their religious views, what did they see or what did they experience when they were having this near-death experience? Was people that were, let's say, Roman Catholic, did they all share a similar view as opposed to people who were Mormons, or people who were Buddhist, or people who were from the Nation of Islam? Was there different things that correlated with different people's religious views?
That's an excellent question. Funnily enough, yes. When I actually started researching into near-death experiences, I realized that actually there were a few studies or some work done on this idea that there are a lot of people that, if they came from, for example, the Christian background, they would encounter Jesus. If they came from a Hindu background, they would encounter, the certain deities. So there is evidence to suggest that depending on what religious belief that a person holds, that's who they tend to meet, if they tend to meet, a deity or a spiritual figure in the afterlife. It's usually connected to their present belief, which I think is really interesting, because I think what that shows us is that our filter with how we actually look at life really does directly affect what it is that we choose to experience. Does that make sense? Yes,
it does. I heard a story 2 or 3 years ago about this guy who he had died. And his mother was Jewish, and his father was from the Nation of Islam. And when he died, he came into this room, or wherever he came into, and he's seen Moses, and he's seen Allah in the same room, and he was watching Moses and Allah fight each other over his soul. And at the end of the fight, he realized that Moses and Allah combined into one being, and there was that one being who accepted him. So, and I say that to say, you know, was it based on somebody's religious aspects? I mean, did you come across anybody who had a split views and who kind of just morphed, you know, whatever their experiences and their customs during their life, did they ever morph those into one? Have you heard anything like that before?
I haven't, you know, out of all that's really interesting to hear what you've just said, because I've not actually come across anybody who's had a similar experience to what you're talking about, which actually is really cool, because I'll have to go and actually look this up now. You know, definitely going to have to go and have a look. But no, I mean, that sounds really, really interesting. What I have actually come across in one particular case study, and I think this was, do you know who this was? This was Mellon Thomas Benedict. Are you familiar with Mellon Thomas Benedict at all?
No, I have not. No.
No, I think he talks about his experience, and I'm quite sure it was his experience that when he sort of crossed over, he experienced a matrix of all the different deities or spiritual figures that people would talk about. So, you know, when he came to the light, if I remember correctly, he would see like Buddha morphing into Krishna, morphing into Moses, you know, all the different deities. And I think that's probably the closest that I've come to with the different deities. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that's probably similar to, or that'd be right in line with what I would experience had I the experience. Because my understanding and views right now, especially right now where Tom is pretty universal, and I understand the creative abilities that our mind has and our spirit has, especially going into those other realms. I mean, I'm an out-of-body traveler, so I'm able to initiate that, you know, conscious, intentional experience, and I found that all of the environments, or majority of the environments that I go to in those states, all are a direct reflection of something that's within me, and that's reflected across the board with all these near-death experiences that people have. That it's all presented to them in a way that they're able to comprehend and accept.
Absolutely, yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah. So back to the psychotherapy practice that you have. I'm curious if there's the discernment process that you go through on determining how deep you can go with somebody. I mean, because, you know, I can see, you know, if say somebody picks you out of the phone book and goes, okay, I need a psychotherapist, I need to go talk to somebody, and puts their finger on your name on the book and sets an appointment, come in. I mean, somebody who's fresh off the street, you have no idea where they're from, what they're about. You know, what's the process that you would go through to determine how deeply you could go with somebody along the spiritual lines?
I think the first thing that I tend to do when people come in is an initial assessment, which is really when I'll sit down with the person and take down, you know, their details, what it is that they're coming in for. And I think it's really important that we are able to get a feel, you know, because I tend to work quite differently in the sense that I'm not very textbook. I tend to go, you know, quite a lot with how I'm feeling. You know, what is the person's energy like? How am I feeling with the person? And of course, I always start off within the traditional framework, because I never quite know who it is that's going to be coming in, which, you know, you've quite rightly said. So what I tend to do is, you know, ask around, feel around, and you usually get quite a good idea as to where the person is at when they come in. But then I guess I've worked with quite a few people, so I think, you know, I'm guessing that the experience sort of helps as well. And what I do tend to ask them, however, is whether they have any spiritual beliefs. So I've actually built that into my initial assessment. So, you know, when I ask that question at the end, you usually get an idea as to whether the person, you know, is spiritually inclined or not, whether they're open-minded or not. So I guess it's a combination of questioning and just really discerning, using your intuition and finding out what the best way forward is.
Yeah. Well, I found that, you know, I've been on this path for quite a while now, you know, coming up on 30 years. And since I made that first conscious step and asked that first conscious question, and I found through my own personal experience that there's something I've experienced that I've termed the splashback effect, where I will, you know, come across somebody, you know, here you are, you're blossoming inside, your spirit is growing, you're excited about all these new things that you're experiencing and sensing, and a whole brand new world opens wide open in front of you, and you just want to shout from the rooftops about this wonderful thing that you found. So you want to share this with others. I mean, everybody that's on this path has to go through that sort of experience where they want to share this exciting thing they found. And
yeah,
I've experienced, or what I've termed the splashback effect, where I've gone in kind of cold into a conversation with somebody and started talking about things that they just flat out were not ready to hear. And I get energetically, you know, there's a resistance that you hit, and then depending on, you know, the topic and the subject, et cetera, I've experienced negative things in my own personal life from trying to share what I'm all excited about, right?
Yep.
So I'm saying that I have learned and developed basically the same methods that you're using in your practice in my everyday life. How I assess people and how I probe before jumping in with both feet and just spilling my guts to somebody about this wonderful, amazing thing we call life. I always have to feel them out before I can determine what is safe for me and good for them to share. You know, you don't want it to fall on deaf ears, right?
Exactly. You know, I think that's so great, actually, because and you're quite right. I think everybody goes through that phase, don't they? Like when they're really excited about what it is that they're learning and really wanting to share it. And it's interesting, actually, because when I went through that phase too, I wasn't actually yet a psychotherapist. I think that's a good thing. You know, I was still I was a teacher before I was a psychotherapist. So I think it was a good thing that I was sort of learning this stuff. And so when I went through that phase, I guess I wasn't sort of forcing my views down, or, you know, talking to somebody as such where it fell on deaf ears, or maybe it was, I don't know, but it was good. It wasn't in a professional environment. So by the time I got to the psychotherapy bit, I kind of learned that, okay, I've got to be a little bit, you know, careful or discerning when I'm speaking to people. So yeah, I hear what you're saying completely.
So do you find your patients that seek you out, do you find statistically speaking, do you find that they're more inclined to the spiritual lifestyle, or are they inclined to different types of lifestyles? I guess what I'm getting at is are your patients more inclined to being open to these kind of topics as not open to these kind of topics?
I'll tell you what, something really, really weird. When I found that the clients that I tend to work with, they tend to mirror where I am along my own journey, which is really interesting to see if you're looking at it retrospectively. That, you know, it's amazing because a vast majority of the people that I work with, they may not necessarily be into these topics, but they're very open-minded to explore the topics. So I'm very much a believer in the existence of a one being, you know, in a God, you know, if we give it that label. And I always tend to think that God or the universe always brings me people who number one, I can help, and number two, who can help me? So it's interesting to see, because most of the people that actually come to me, they're pretty open-minded. And the way that I tend to always tend to go if I'm not sure is I always use the scientific studies first. So if I'm not sure whether how spiritual, or whether they're open to it or not, when I start to explore this with them, I tend to sort of say, well, did you know that there's been research done in this area or in this area, and take it from there.
Right. Yeah. Good stuff. So, we'll segue off into the Transcendent Mind, the title of your book. For our listeners out there, would you describe and define what you consider the Transcendent Mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you remember a while back, I'd sort of said that I'd read The Course in Miracles and the Bhagavad Gita, which talked about the idea of this one singular consciousness that was split in to individual pieces, which would be us. So as I went and did the research with the near-death experiences, it did emerge. The more I looked into it, teamed up with my own personal experiences, I came to actually recognize, I think with great certainty, that there is indeed a transcendent mind, which is literally a one consciousness. When they all say that we're all interconnected, it is like one web that connects us all at the very core. And the thing with the transcendent mind is, we need to recognize that we are both the transcendent mind as well as an individual mind at the same time. So, a good example is that if you imagine an ocean, so if you take a huge ocean, that would be likened to the transcendent mind. Now, when we take a droplet of that ocean, I can take a droplet and, move it a good few kilometers away. I still have the droplet. It has all the same qualities, all the same properties of the ocean, but it's individual. So it's an individual drop as well as still being the ocean. And that is a little bit like us. We're individual minds, but at the same time, we are also inherently connected to this and also through this transcendent mind, this universal consciousness.
Well said, well said. So have you found that there is any, for lack of a better term, a singular sentience to the transcendent mind? I mean, a God voice, or you know what I'm talking about, a singular, individuated aspect of that transcendent mind?
What do you mean? Can I ask that a little bit more?
The voice, the gray bearded guy sitting on a throne, or God in a person, as in a being, as in a singular, sentient, individuated aspect of consciousness. Okay,
that's a really good question. I don't think that there is. You know what? I think there is, and I think there isn't. That's the only way that I can say it. I'm not sure about there being, in terms of the sentient individual, so to speak. So, like we talk about the traditional God with the long sort of white beard, perhaps. I'm not sure that there's that, but I do think that there is a one energy. But at the same time, I think that one energy is absolutely everything. So it is. And it isn't, and when you're looking at, I've met some people that have had near-death experiences who have claimed that they've actually come across a being. None of them actually have said that it takes a particular form. Most of them have referred to it as a feeling or a light, but they are very, very aware that they feel that that is God spark, God energy. So yes and no. I guess it kind of depends on how you experience it.
So do you kind of see the transcendent mind as being the mind of the collective consciousness all in unity?
Absolutely. And I actually think, I see the transcendent mind as being collective consciousness, all of unity, and I actually see that being synonymous with God as well. There is only one consciousness, and everything exists within the one consciousness. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, so have you gotten any slack from, well, okay, let me ask it differently. so there's a lot of people out there that say, I am God, and you are God, and we all are God. But there's also a lot of people that give other people that say that a lot of slack for saying it. There's no way that you're God and I'm God. God is different from us. So when you wrote this book, and it's kind of along those same lines, is that each one of us, we're just a drop in the ocean, but all together we're God. So each one of us are individual aspects of God. So have you caught any kind of slack from that aspect?
Not yet, I haven't. Not yet. And I think the reason for that is because, once you read the book, you'll recognize that in the first 2 chapters, the way that I try to put the argument across is that I have had a look at a lot of the academic work done in the area of parapsychology, and we're beginning to see this idea of people, for example, that meditate together for a short period of time, are able to. So if you take one person, let's say 2 people have meditated, you take one and you place them separate from the other. And when the first person sees a flash of light, the other person who is placed elsewhere, the brain actually picks up the flash of light, even though it may be on an unconscious level. So the way that I put my argument forward is to say, look, I'm not blindly saying that just looking at spiritual texts or just looking at the metaphysical side that, I am God and you are God and we all have the God spark. But actually, if you look at a lot of the academic work that is being done, it is suggesting that there seems to be this one consciousness that connects us all together. And also if we really do go deep inside and ask ourselves, how we feel what another person is feeling at times, how our intuition functions, how we know when somebody is thinking about us and the phone rings, that sort of thing. Pets, dogs, for example, being able to gauge when their owners are coming home. Actually, my brother used to have a dog. And he was very close to the dog, and bless him, he was put down actually last year, JD the dog. And but the most bizarre thing that JD used to do, when my brother when his car used to turn on the road, or even if he was walking home from university, JD would know that, my brother's he's in close proximity, and he would walk over to the door and just wait for him, and we'd know someone's here because JD's at the door. So
Yeah.
So I tend to look at all of these things, and I haven't had anybody yet say that how can you say that we are God and that God is different. But I think that's probably because of the way that I've structured the argument for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with our terminology. There's so many stigmas behind all these names. Behind the word God, there's a stigma. Behind the word Jesus, there's a stigma. Behind the word saint, there's a stigma. Behind the word prophet, there's a stigma. There's a stigma behind all this language that we use, but in the same terms, we don't have the language to actually describe these things. So, I personally have caught in slack just because I'm saying something. I'm saying an English word that I'm trying to convey an emotional connection to, but the person I'm talking to knows that word but has a different emotional connection to it.
Yeah.
So it seems to be really hard to be able to bridge that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is that the ice cream?
Sorry guys, that's the ice cream van outside.
Ice cream man.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's good timing. But yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. I agree with what you're saying, and I think it does come down to perceptions at the end of the day, doesn't it? What you've been brought up with and how you relate to a particular label.
Yeah. Yeah, we are definitely pretty good at labeling things on this planet.
Indeed.
That's that judgment aspect of humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the missing piece, as in P-E-A-C-E, not P-I-E-C-E, in emotional well-being. I'm curious on how you are applying or what benefit in the psychotherapeutic practice that bringing the transcendent mind into the mix versus an over traditional psychotherapy and dealing with people's issues and problems, with the traditional methods, what are you seeing, and how are you applying this different aspect into the healing of your patients?
That really depends with what the client comes in with, what issue the client comes in with. Very often, I have seen people that have come in who don't actually have a specific issue. Okay. So what happens is they come in and they'll sort of say that there's an emptiness that I'm feeling. There's like this void within. Oh, there goes the ice cream van. So they'll say that, they come in with this idea of this void that they're experiencing. And, quite often when we start having the conversation and when we get into it, a lot of that is actually coming from a fear of not knowing what lies beyond, which is fascinating. Like when we get to the bottom of it, they'll be like, well, I don't know what I'm here to do. I don't know what the greater purpose of life is. And I'm finding that in this time particularly, there seem to be a lot of people that are coming forward and questioning that. So when we actually start to explore this idea of a transcendent mind, and when we start to explore what it means to them in the context of their own, living, the way that they live or the way that they experience spiritualism, that alone sometimes can actually be enough to cause a deeper shift within a person. And then, of course, when we start to look at emotional healing and when we bring the mind into the aspect and, looking at, okay, how are we going to now watch our thoughts? So there's an aspect of us that is doing the thinking, but there's also an aspect of us that is observing the thinking, and it's really when we start to explore the different facets of the mind and what that greater observer is or who that greater observer is. And all of this, as you start to work with the client, it really does bring about a deeper, more fulfilled, of an overall healing that I don't think traditional therapy can really tackle, because traditional therapy is quite Newtonian and Newtonian and materialistic in its application. Even if you look at, I don't know how much you guys know about therapy, but generally speaking, there are 3 models that therapists employ. So the first that you'll look at will be the behaviorist approach, which is, of course, changing your behavior. And cognitive behavioral therapy, that sort of thing. It's very much based on the idea that we operate somewhat like machines, that we can change our thoughts, which will change our emotion, which will change our action. So the second type would then be the psychodynamic, which looks at really going into the person's past and exploring that. And the third type is the humanistic approach, which is more to do with the answer is within. Now, when the humanistic approach came out, so we're looking at the work of, let's say, Maslow, which is one of the fathers of that third psychology, it's really interesting because he talks about a concept called peak experiences, where he talks about a mystical element. And actually, when he first started doing this work, he actually named those experiences mystical experiences, but it wasn't very well received in the academic field, because obviously it had the mystical element to it. So he later changed the name from mystical to peak experiences. So you see, the old psychology, it's still very Newtonian based. But when you actually have a look at the truth of who we are, that allows psychology to then go a lot deeper. And, psychotherapy, I guess, becomes somewhat more meaningful.
I kind of see it. All 3 of those aspects are essential to truly growing.
Yes.
We do the shadow, what people call shadow work, right?
Yeah.
You go in and you're dealing with things of your past, traumas or concepts that you've adopted and that are erroneous, and then you have the patterns within your life that or the things that you do, the thinking processes, the change your mind, change your world aspect, which is very true, at least in my experience, for sure. And then, obviously, the mystical experience. And all 3 of those things I've seen play out in so many people's lives that are on the path, that are working towards growing internally and truly understanding who and what we are. So yeah, I definitely see all three of those aspects as being the right tool. Maybe there needs to be a new name for all three of those put together. Maybe we'll call it Transcendent Mind
Therapy. Yeah, I mean,
right.
I think the traditional therapy, I think is good. I think we need to sort of expand it though, and I think we need to go a little bit deeper. The way that consciousness is generally moving, there seem to be more people that are interested in really helping themselves or this particular field of work. But what is really interesting is when we allow ourselves to take a transcendent view to life, we also open ourselves up to other therapies, like past life regression, for example. There have been a lot of people that have really had brilliant healings through past life regression and hypnosis. And again, when we look at the idea of past life regression, the idea that we may have trauma still stored within us from a previous or a different incarnation, so to speak. When you open up to that, you really open up to a greater level of attaining more peace within. So it's not just sticking to the traditional stuff. It's opening up to, well, how else can I heal? What else out there might actually be able to help me to release the trauma?
Yeah. And, I think we have we are in a very unique time in this planet's history. I believe that when we take a look at how spiritual growth and spiritual mastery has been done in our past, to reach any of those higher states of being, you had to have the ability to go to a monastery for 6 months or a year, or devote your whole life, become a nun or a monk, and just devote your whole life into these things to be able to actually reach those states. Now, in the world that we find ourselves in today, with the communication systems we have out there, i.e. the internet, the television, the communication, the closeness of the planet, we've developed kind of a new breed of seekers on the planet who are everyday Joes, the guys that are working their 5-day-a-week jobs. They have to make ends meet, they're paying their bills, but they also have a very great desire and interest in understanding who and what we are, and finding that balance between those two things, and continue and being able to grow and progress. It has kind of created a whole new, new to the planet is what I'm referring to, a breed of people here on the planet that are actually advancing. They're growing, and they're actually reaching some pretty amazing states while keeping one foot in both worlds, having that one foot in the third dimensional working world where you're out there having to, you're doing something to make money, to be able to keep a roof over your head, and pursuing your spiritual interests. So with that thought in mind, and this new breed on the planet in mind, I guess the question I have for you is how are you seeing that that spiritual aspect grow and develop within the common person, the 9-to-5er, the one that has to work, that isn't able to shut out the third dimension to be able to focus on spiritual growth?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the sort of notion of the internet, coming in within the last few decades, I think that has really opened a lot of doors to how we are now able to share and communicate information. So I think that's had a massive impact. I think when we team that up with also what's happening on the external side with like the financial situations that we've been having, I don't think the old systems are working as well anymore, because I think people are generally becoming more aware. I think, when we really look at the bigger picture, to answer your question with how we've gotten to today, when we look at the bigger picture, we have seen in the last sort of 50 years or so, more children growing up, partaking in education, going on to further education. Then we've seen the introduction of the internet. And I think when you start to put all of these things together, as a person becomes more educated, they develop, let's say, more critical thinking skills. And some of them are then able to step back and sort of really ask the bigger questions. You know, I mean, I'm in the UK, but actually my parents and my ancestors are from India. My grandparents were born in India, and they grew up on farms. They then went and moved to Africa, where my parents were born. My parents came here when they were probably around about 10 or 11, and they experienced, there weren't very many Asian people back in I think they came over in 1960, something like that. And so they were having to go to school, and they were having to learn in a different way. Then, of course, when my generation came about, because they'd already done the groundwork, so because of the way that they had set life up, it actually allowed us, yes, not only did we get into 9 to 5, but because we were slightly more educated, we were looking at the world somewhat differently. And I think because we had somewhat of a privileged upbringing, it gives us the space to actually ask the questions. So I think the way that people are being educated, the way that people are now not only 9 to 5, but also setting up their own businesses, the way that people are thinking in the last few years, I think, has changed. And I think that's what's really contributed towards people sort of asking the bigger questions. And you can see that through academia as well. You know, the way that science is sort of progressing from Newtonian to quantum, the way that therapists are finding that the old way isn't working so much, you know, the way that parents are sort of looking at their children and thinking, we're working really hard here, we're doing a 9 to 5, there's got to be a better way. We want to spend more time with our children or you know, with the family and stuff. So I think it's a combination of everything that has now brought us to this point where people are just, they're looking for an alternative way, you know?
Right, yeah. You know, I actually hold down a full-time job, and you know, this is you know, do this on the radio thing on the side, right? But it's actually more of a passion than my work in the third dimension. You know, the stuff to earn enough to keep my level of comfort here. But oh geez, where was I going? Draw a blank. Oh, I hate it when that happens. I call it a brain fart.
So do you think that that this global awakening is due some part to this explosion in population? You know, because 30 years ago there wasn't almost 8 billion people on the planet. Now there's, we just have more and more and more people here. So is that almost like a driving force, do you see, as to expanding this level of consciousness?
I think possibly. We're having to think about more practical aspects, I suppose, like housing, feeding, poverty, that sort of thing. But I also think in the grander scheme of things that, when you, for example, look at, let's say, the ancient Hindu calendar, and they talk about the 4 ages that come about, and they talk about like the golden age, which is supposedly what we're entering into now. So I think to a certain extent, it isn't just the internet or the growth in population. I think also there is a bigger scheme at work as well. And I think naturally we are, once you go through the dark ages, naturally you're going to eventually go back into the golden ages. So I do think that there is that element happening in the background too,
Yeah.
What do you picture when you think about the quote unquote golden age?
What do I picture? That's a good question. I would say that really for me it would be people who were living in more of a balanced way. So, and I'm quite sort of blatant when I say this, that it's not, for me, it's not about just, airy-fairy transcendence. It's actually about recognizing that we're human beings. We have a whole wide array of emotions, and it's about integrating the whole of who we are. And I think when we start to come from that perspective, we tend to take different decisions that are more loving, that are more compassionate, that are more kind, that are more empathetic. And I think for me, that's what a golden age looks like. People recognizing, number one, who they really are, and really becoming, number two, more enhanced versions of themselves, so that we're creating a better place to live in, because change ultimately is within the mind of a person.
So in creating this better place, that kind of brings me to my next question to you. In your book, you talk about the three minds. And we just did an interview a few months ago with this guy, and he talked about the three minds. And his three minds were the head, heart, and hands. The thinking about doing something, the emotional connection of doing something, and the actual doing something. And you explained the three minds a little bit different. I was wondering if you can kind of get into that a little bit.
What did you read about the three minds in there?
The head mind, the heart mind, and I think the mind in the solar plex or the stomach mind.
The intuitive mind. Yeah. So the head mind is the idea of really the part of us that does all of like the conscious thinking, so we talk about the conscious thinking, everyday decisions that we're having to make. The heart mind, of course, is really looking at the idea of what it is that we're really feeling inside, the heart connection that we have with people. And the gut mind, intuition, the key that really gives us the little clues, the internal guidance as to where we've really got to go next and what we've got to do. I think that's really where the idea of the connection with the transcendence comes in as well, that we're always really receiving messages, and the question is that, are we acting upon those messages,
Yeah, well, how often do you come across people that are actively using all three minds at the same time? And that, and also, what is your advice into becoming aware of all three minds and how to use those simultaneously?
Right, so that's such a good question, and the first answer would be, I don't come across many people that are using all of them together, because I think that if we were, we would probably be better sort of rounded individuals. With regards to how we can become more attuned with all three of them, what I would say to you is that, look, start to become aware, very, very basically, of where it is that you're in life at the moment. First of all, where are you struggling? Where do you want to grow? How do you want to move forward in life? That will give you a very good idea of what you're lacking where, so to speak. So, for example, if you're the sort of person that's like, okay, I really need to get more disciplined and I really need to stop procrastinating. So that is telling you that your head mind, you need to discipline a little bit more. So you've got to have a look at your time management and really have a look at how you can begin to build new neural networks to bring that about. And at the same time, not losing touch with your gut instincts. So it's not all about just using the head, but it's also about really listening to what's going on within. But the one thing I will say, that to use all those three minds that we're talking about, you do have to sometimes do the deeper work, and you will have to remove some of the emotional baggage that you are carrying, because there is usually a reason as to why we're not listening or working with the three of those in alignment. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Do you also kind of see a trend in, a lot of people have, let's say, their heart and their stomach mind open, but a lot of people don't have their mind open, or vice versa, or any combination. Do you see that more, that more people, what do you see more people on that have, these minds open? Is there most people working from the stomach and the heart, or do you see most people working from the heart and the mind, or how do you see our society now working from?
I think generally speaking, we're very head-based at the moment. I think we need to open up more to the heart and the intuition. But predominantly, I think the way that we've sort of moved forward tends to be, we're very much in the head. We try to be very logical about everything. We like certainty. So being logical often has the the idea of wanting certainty, that I need to know how this is going to happen. I need to know when this is going to happen. And it's just about learning that, well, we don't always know what's around the corner tomorrow. So more of the people that I see, it's usually they're coming more from the head than they are from the heart or the gut.
Yeah, quite interesting. We are rapidly approaching the end of the hour here, and wow, this is some good stuff. So, Sunita, what have you got coming up? Have you? I know you have your normal practice, and you've written a book. Are you going to be speaking anywhere or doing any workshops or anything along those lines?
Yep, I run pretty regular workshops here in the UK, which you can check out on the website. But actually, I'm going to be in Seattle and Oregon in September. So I'll be there.
I'm 90 miles away.
Right between.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of Seattle and Portland.
Oh, wow. Okay, so maybe we can, I'll pop in to see you guys when I'm there, perhaps. So I'll be teaching a few workshops there on actually how actual tools and techniques of how you can actually begin to open up, your wise mind and really increase your productivity and get rid of some of your emotional baggage. So, yeah.
Nice. And have you got a calendar of events on your website?
Yes, there is.
And how can people pick up the book?
Amazon, which it will be available on. Also, I think over there, Barnes & Noble, you can order it in from. And yeah, I think they're probably the two best ways in the US.
It is released now, isn't it?
It is, yes. It came out the end of March.
Okay, good. Yeah, sometimes we do get those advanced copies here at the show, and you're like, oh well, I got a book in my hand. What do you mean it's not released?
Oh bless! No, it's there. It's out.
All right, and your website is sunitapattani.com, and
That's
links
right.
are in the info section of wherever you happen to be listening to this at. And if you're interested in hearing hour 2, I would urge you to go over to www.the100thmonkeyradio.com and check it all out there. It's lots of stuff there for you guys to enjoy. We will be taking a short break, and we will be back in the members section. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change.
How do you wash your sweet potato?
Namaste.
All the problems that divide the world of black and white.